away any secrets.
Huh?
All right, we are back from recess, and we're ready to start off with the finance director.
Let me
portion.
set the stage before
Okay,
I
go
give it
ahead.
to Tammy. I've learned to be careful on when I let her go, because she gets going. That was an affectionate, respectful comment, by the way. What you have is a chart we're going to talk about, but a look at revenues and what the revenue history in picture form has looked like. Behind that, you actually have the actual history by revenue going back to '06 and forward to 2022. And there's about 3 or 4 pages of that to get through. Now remember, this is operating budget only. We're not talking about the CFP. This is general fund. We're not talking about the utilities or some of the enterprise accounts yet. That's still to come. Then you have I call it a cost control chart, but it's this line chart that shows variations by year, by department on where revenues have been, or where expenditures have been going. And so it's, again, it's a different way of looking at it. We'll talk about it when we get there. And then you have the expenditure history for the general fund by personnel, by supplies, by services, intergovernmental, and capital, which is a way of looking at where the money is going. But you also have on the page that has the blue shading where the money's been going by department or program. So and then if you want the other 30 pages that I got a copy of between now and September, is the detail by department that underlies this summary. But what you have here tonight, Mayor, is a revenue picture and revenue detail. You have an expenditure picture and expenditure detail. And we want to talk about that and what some of the highlights are as we walk through that. So with that as introduction, I will now turn it over to Tammy. So.
Thank you. I'll try not to take all night. Okay. First of all, before we even get into this, I've been doing this for many years, and I've never went into a budget process, said to the departments, tell me what your needs are, and had it come back where our revenues outproduced our wants and our needs, okay? So we're not in uncharted ground, all right? Again, the city's not going bankrupt. I tell everybody that I meet, the city is not going bankrupt. We just have choices to make, and some of them are tough, but we've been doing this for a long time, and we'll continue to do this. We are solvent. The state auditor's office comes in every year. That's one of the things they look at, and not once have they ever come back and said that the city of Bothell is not solvent. Okay, so I think that's a positive in our.
So Tammy, what you're saying is at this point in the budget process, it's never balanced.
It's never balanced. If it was balanced, it would be shocking, absolutely shocking to me. So I just want to be clear about that. But it's an interesting process that we go through, and we do encourage departments to let us know what their needs are, because even if we can't fulfill them today, we might be able to later. And so we need to know what's going on in those departments, just like the department directors also put together goals for their departments and opportunities and challenges that they perceive. Even if they're 5 years out, we're going to have a challenge if this doesn't change. That's how you might see the end of the cliff, but you're backpedaling quick and trying to make those changes before you ever get close. And so that's just good fiscal management, and it's what we do. On this, a couple other things about the taxation. In your council retreat manual, we always put, or for the most years, I believe we've always put taxation for all cities in Washington State are pretty close. I think last time we did just Snohomish County and King County, but basically it shows if they have a fire department or a fire district that they pay separately for, their utility taxes. So you can look at any city and really see how it compares to Bothell on a taxation comparison, including if you have a head tax, it'll show, the Bellevues, the Kirkland, the Redmond that do. So you can really see what's going on there. The one thing that we don't show is county taxes. And if anybody's ever lived in the county and you've seen what the county road rates are, you'll know that you can rent a whole city of Bothell for what most people are paying just for road tax, let alone schools. Okay, so we do offer a pretty good deal. We are in the middle of the pack. It is, again, responsible. It's responsible. There's a lot of conversation goes on around here before any taxes or rates get raised. And we always substantiate those with the need and the purpose, and we follow up to make sure that's what happens. When we raise the business license fee, in order to collect monies for the road fund or the street fund, those monies you'll see in every budget where I sent Aaron $500,000, which is the business license fees that we increased. So we do follow through exactly with what we tell people we're going to do, and the auditors do come and check and make sure we do that. Now this sheet, if you look at orange, the orange at the bottom, this is all the general fund revenue types, okay? 2007-8, that biennium is orange. 9-10 is gray. 11-12 is yellow, and so on. Basically what this shows is that the city has 3 to 4 major revenue sources or streams that are coming in. But what is really telling about this information is that if you see the size of the square for property tax in orange, which is 2007, which keeping in mind that halfway through 2007 is when we came out of a residential construction boom and we hit the Great Recession. So 2007 wasn't totally bad because for half the year we were still in the bubble, flying high. So, but if you see that the gray square and you keep going up, you start seeing when you hit about 2015 where we're actually coming out of the aftermath of that recession, we're heading in the right direction. We're seeing revenues happen. And of course, this city, we saw it a little earlier because we did some investing during that period, took advantage of when construction materials and labor were very cheap. You know, we took advantage of that opportunity where people would underbid just to keep their employees working. And so in Bothell, we benefited for that and hopefully benefited the economy in our region as well. If you get up and you look into 2017-18, which is the blue, you see each area of the major revenue streams, that chunk gets a little bit bigger. What's happening is we're seeing construction sales tax and one-time development revenues happening. Now, when you get up into, and that transition is happening between 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, those, we'll continue to see that as development here goes from actual development and construction to ongoing revenues, which means regular retail, utility tax, the property tax from all these buildings that are going up. And so we'll just continue to watch them. This is a very conservative revenue projection going out to 2022, and I'll tell you why. Because that's a city policy, it's in our budget book, that's what I am required to do. We do not speculate on revenues that aren't in the bank or that we don't know are happening. Okay, we don't, I don't look out to 2022 and say, well, this company bought this property and so we know they're gonna build something and it'll happen in this. I don't know that. And even the person who tells me they're going to do this, I need to see permits happening and that type of thing in order to know it's really truly going to happen. So I don't want to speculate on revenues coming in until we actually see them. Again, this is something that the banks, the credit raters really like about how we do business here in Bothell. That said, you can see each one of the different revenue streams, charges for services will continue to grow. It's growing up to the point where it's coming in. Business taxes, by the way, that's the It's actually utility tax, and that's what bars or the state legislature gives the auditors the right to tell us what the names of these are, and that's the name they chose. So we put them in there under this, but that is truly utility tax. But you see charges for services growing too. That has a lot to do with development, and it will continue in that regard. It also has to do with some other things in the city. We have full cost recovery is what we look for. So the more that's going on around town, the more we will be looking to charge the user for those privileges to work or play in Bothell. Okay, now if we turn the page, I'll take any questions that you have, but this is something that we use to project revenues. When you look at trend analysis, you can't just project revenues based on trend analysis. You have to know what's going on in the city. I have to work with Tom and his staff and work together with Aaron and hers, all the different departments, John Gates in Parks. I need to know what's going on. We sit down together. I come up with a projection. They come up with a projection. We sit down and discuss the projection and decide who's right. And yeah, Aaron's kind of a baby about it. No, I'm just kidding. Actually, it's really amazing. A lot of times you come in, and when Tom came in just recently, we had the exact same numbers, because we talk about this so much. But a lot of there's like with police, I need to know what their emphasis is going to be, because that's going to affect the court. How many people are going to be in there if it's a DUI emphasis over a 2-year period. I need to know if it's going to be traffic, tickets, that type of thing. So we all work together to come up with these revenues to ensure that they're as accurate as we can make them. Of course, we are putting together revenues 2.5 to 2 3/4 of a years earlier than what we're actually going to be using them in, because I've been working on those revenues since spring. Okay, and they're not going to take effect until 2017, and then they're going to be in effect through 17 and 18. So it's a long period of time, and that's why we do the quarterly reports, to make sure that if something comes in different, that we can adjust very quickly and make sure that we keep our fiscal position that I keep talking about. Inflows and outflows, you adjust to make sure that the end result is where you want to be, and that's what we've done. I thought this would be interesting for you guys as far as seeing from 2006 through 2022. Just so you can kind of, when you look at the revenue projections, you can kind of go, that makes sense. And also you get to see them, and each one of these property tax, sales tax, that type of stuff, these all line out to the categories on the front page. Do we have any questions about revenues? Okay. Oh, okay.
The hotel motel sales tax, you don't show any change, and I know you're saying you're structured this as conservative, but we do have McMinimans. Do we have any idea what new revenue that's going to create for our city?
I can't talk about McMinimans specifically.
But hotels that would be like McMinimans, what could we expect?
And
Because
we have
the city all
two
block,
hotels
right?
that are coming in here too.
Right.
And once the hotels go in, we'll start speculating on what those revenues are going to be based on the number of rooms. You can saturate, as well. And so some people we're hoping to draw from Woodinville and other areas, our business parks. Our hotels are filled. On weekends is when they have the most need, and the heads and beds really comes into effect. They try to bring people in on the weekends and that. And probably the hotels that are going in here and McMinimans will really play to that period of time. Yeah, I do anticipate an increase. The policy that we use for hotel motel tax, because those are restricted revenues, is we don't appropriate them until they're in the bank. So we speculate this, and then as they grow, we go, okay, but we don't really speculate on growth until we see, first of all, them built, and second of all, what kind of occupancy that we actually see.
Okay, and on the retail sales portion, does that include restaurants and liquor tax? Mm-hmm. And what percentage of liquor tax do we keep as a city of $1? Do you know offhand?
You know what? I don't know offhand what that is. I can find out.
Yeah, it's curious, because we obviously have Amaro, which has been added this year and a great asset. McMinimans has basically kind of 7 different restaurants or whatever they have over there.
And when you
Public
fill,
house.
when you fill hotels that don't have restaurants in them in your downtown, the restaurants will come.
Yes.
I will guarantee you. So, I mean, it all works out together, and that's why the city, not myself, but the city did so much work up front in order, with the economists and with city planners and that type of thing, in order to come up with a mix that actually kept people in the city from morning until late at night, which these hotels and McMinimans and some of these places will do, and then provide the parking, because none of it would have come without some parking. So it's all pretty well thought out, and then it follows based on the planning and the code and that kind of stuff to make sure
Tammy,
that that's what
let me
happens.
jump in. I mentioned earlier before I step out for a quick break, but there is some good news here. I mean, this is a pretty conservative budget, and some of the policies that you've been following, and I mentioned this at the retreat, I mean, most of the communities around us during the recession were looking at 20 to 30% real cuts in staffing levels and service levels. And you guys looked at about a 5% cut. And how you balance that out and what program areas and stuff, sure, there were choices. But you had your reserves that kind of buffered that because you had some conservative policies. We've rebuilt those reserves back. We don't want to start drawing them back down again. But there were a couple things, a little good news I wanted to point out. Tammy moved pretty quickly, which was great. But back on the sales tax history there, if you're on the chart that shows the sales tax category, if you just look at the top line retail sales, the main core retail, that was the issue you were raising, Josh, about, well, what about the effect of this business or that? And Tammy can't talk on the record about specific businesses, but we do have the numbers by each business. We get to look at them, we just can't talk about them. Mm-hmm. But you notice pre-recession, 06, 07, you started to see the effect of the recession going from 9 million down to 8 million in sales taxes from 6 to 7, and then you could really see the recession affecting, dropping you down to around 6.2, 6.7, 6.6, all the way through up until about 2015. And in 2015, you're not even back to pre-recession levels. You're just close to 8 million in 2015, and that's about where you left off in 07. So that recession really cut into your core. But now you take a look at 16 is estimated at 8.4, and I haven't seen the real forecast through year end, but it could be a little stronger. 8.8, 9.1, 9.5. This is the return on investment that you have made in your economic development strategy, and that is working. So that's also worth highlighting. So, Tammy, were you moving on? I had one
I
comment.
wanted to finish my comment.
Oh, I'm sorry, John.
I like that we're heading back there, just like you say, city manager, but what I'm wondering is if this is a normal course of recovery, and how much can we attribute to actually the planning of reinvestment that we did downtown? Are we being a little bit conservative in this, or are we going to see even greater in 2017 than we're even seeing on here?
You know Tammy better than I do. She's underestimated her revenues. You know, you want to underestimate your revenues and overstate your expenses and hope that the variables go favorable and you end up with a stronger ending balance. You hope your revenues come in a little stronger and your expenditures come in a little lower, and then you get to add to your ending fund balance.
Right, yeah.
If we know that something is going to happen during this biennium, it's in here. If we speculate it could, it's not in here. As far as the revenues go and sales tax, one interesting thing to look at is the difference between, if you go here into the details behind, look at construction sales tax and look at regular sales tax. look at those two, because that gives you a good picture of where we're at in this transition. When you see when you see the construction sales tax going down and the regular sales tax going up, we have transitioned.
So you're
Okay, so that's what we're looking, that's the pattern that I'm looking for in order to know where this is all going to end up.
Okay, so you're saying for 2017, 2018, which we're working and planning on right now, your projections include, say, like a PCC's expected revenue, a Public House, Amaro, McMinimans, all the revenue that's coming in. That projection is already in here. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Councilmember Sandberg has a question for you. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Did you want to finish up with a comment? I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
I think I answered.
Okay,
I was going to say something, forgot. I'll remember before we're done.
okay.
I'm getting old.
Councilmember Sandberg.
So a lot of times we talk about ongoing revenues and one-time revenues. So when we're looking at this chart, are the construction sales tax, is that what we're considering one-time revenue?
Correct.
And anything else in here that we consider just the one-time revenue? Or-
When you look at sales tax on the chart, you see a combination of all sales tax, which is hotel, motel, the construction sales tax, and regular sales tax. So that's a combination of that category within the bars coding. But if you look at the detail in the back, you can actually see each one individually. And then each subcategory then is on the chart, but they are combined on the.
The other big one-time only revenue you have is in the area of development service fees and charges, and well, they break them into two categories, but the licenses and the fees and charges, those are pretty much one-time only. The part that gets tricky, and this is where you need to be careful, is you collect your fees up front, but you might have work over the next 18 to 24 months. So, you can't break it down. It's one of the things that's nice about a 2-year budget, because you're looking at more of a 2-year horizon, which has more of an averaging effect on revenue and expense. But those, I think your construction sales taxes and your development service fees and charges, those are the two big one-time only revenues. Any others you think of, Tammy? I think those are the biggies in the general fund.
Yeah, the interesting thing about, yes, I agree. The interesting thing about construction sales tax and retail sales tax, construction sales tax tends to be interestingly very consistent. Okay, because these contractors are paying every month based on, what they're doing. And what happens is when it changes over to the regular sales tax, that's when you get more of this. So when you have major projects going on, we tend to see it in the same, range every month, where sales tax can be so different. It can be driven by August. People spend a lot of money in August because kids are going back to school. You see a lot of people spending money in December. You see a lot more change in your graphing with regular sales tax. It's actually harder to estimate regular sales tax because weather can play into it. If you have a December where the weather is really bad and people can't get to the mall, now they can go to Amazon. But, back in the day, it was not good to have that fourth quarter have really rough weather. Again, so the construction sales tax is actually pretty consistent. When you see that change, when it becomes less consistent, we'll have transitioned from a downtown that is, revitalization to actually, a new downtown marketplace, that type of thing. And we'll see what comes of that. So far, what I have seen is we have done better than the economists speculated when we first turned in the LIFT application. So we've done better, and that's why when I was talking about Main Street, I feel really confident that we would bring in more revenue than what was taken away back in 2007 or 8 when everything got knocked down at Beta Bothell.
It's also why, frankly, I was being so dicey about the downtown fire versus the Mercantile Building Main Street fire. I don't want people to be scared away from patronizing businesses in downtown. Just that kind of incident around a fire. I mentioned earlier that my sister and my brother-in-law have been regulars at Alexa's Cafe for years. And, when came in on Monday, I asked them Monday night when I was at her place. And I said, so did you go to Alexis for breakfast? Yeah, and boy, it was packed, which was good. I mean, that's sort of the community reaction. Actually, people are coming, the restaurants downtown, actually, I talked to one of the gals at Alexis, and the business is actually up, but it could have very easily gone exactly the other way. And that can cause a big variance too. So this volatility on the sales tax that Tammy was talking about, you've got the property tax, you can see it in that chart, it's pretty stable. And unlike what most people think, it doesn't go up very fast and it doesn't go down. It's just real stable. It's in an econometric term, it's very inelastic. It's just, sales taxes, however, are highly elastic. They can bounce around all over the place. So that's why looking at the line item, and Mary, I know when you and I talked, you said that was one of your issues, that you really wanted to be able to look back and look forward. The analysis of this is not what I wanted to get into tonight. I wanted to show you what we've got. And this is the approach we're going to be taking as we look at the whole budget. And yet, there's some powerful information here. I've got some markup notes I want to comment on when Tammy's through, but the intent is not to go into the weeds on this tonight, but you can see what you've got.
Councilmember Sandberg, were you done with your questions?
Yes.
Okay. Carry on.
Okay, one other thing before I move on to expenditures, I want to make, every chance I get, I try to talk about the difference between operating and capital monies. We don't mix the two. In this city, we do not mix them. There is capital money, there's operating money. The only money that's transferring between is the $500,000 associated with the city hall from the annexation area that I talked about before, and the $500,000 a year that goes in from the business license increase that goes into the street fund, which was basically the idea being we have like 25,000 people that come into Bothell every day to work, and they should be helping with the road problem. And so that happened, I guess, 2 bienniums ago or something. The other thing that I want to reinforce as far as Bothell's not going bankrupt is the general fund has no debt. And I talked about that last Saturday or a couple Saturdays ago, but the general fund, 0 debt. The only debt that we have is in the capital fund, and it's being funded with mostly impact fees that were associated with those projects. And then I'm going to go ahead and get into expenditures, and again.
Before you do, I'd like you to go to the last page on the revenue history. Just before this chart in your packet, but it's this last page of revenues. Okay? When I look at this, I look at 2006, I'm looking at $35,700,000 as total general fund revenues in '06. Look at that number going across all the way to 2012. Isn't until about 2013 that we start to see it even back close to where it was in '06. We're at 35.7, 35.8, 34.2, 33.1, 33.7, 34, starting to turn a little bit in 12 to 35.9, just back to about where you were in 12, about where you were pre-recession in that. You went through a flat revenue growth in your general fund. I mean, there was no revenue growth. And now you can start seeing in 13, it's now 38.9, 39.8, should be by the end of 15 was around 42.3. Our forecast for the end of 16 is 44. That's, again, starting to look, that's when I said your revenues, you are starting to recover. It is a slow growth. That's the good news. The percentage change, however, from 15 to 16, from 42.3 to 44.6 is a 5% change in revenue. That sounds pretty good. 5%, inflation's been like low, 2 to 3%. All right, this is good. The change from 16 to 17, slowing down a little bit, kind of 44.6 to 46.2. It's about a 3.5% growth rate. and then an average about the same from 17 to 18, about 3.7. That doesn't sound too bad. But if I've got asphalt and concrete and other products going up 8 to 10%, and they have taken off recently. I don't know, historically during the recession, you're right, they were lower. But right now, they're not lower. And when we get through the expense side, we're going to take a little visit down memory lane and talk about that in about a few minutes whenever Tammy's through. So just hold that thought, I'll be back to it.
Okay, now looking at the expenditure side. This chart basically goes back to the 7-8 biennium through 17-18. And what we have here is each one of the general fund departments are identified at the bottom there, the bottom axis. And then it shows where the money's going. This is where those tough decisions come in. Basically, when you look at along the bottom, you can basically see that, you know, who took the hits during the recession. Even though everybody thought they felt it, it's very definitely the smaller departments felt it more. And they had less really to work with, less opportunity there. Community development?
Well, the technical term is that which hits the fan is not evenly distributed.
Yes, that was very true. So, and a lot of it had to do with internal service funds because we were all really trying to continue to provide services. So what you see is the internal service funds are the ones that really got hit the hardest. That said, CD, you see a difference in CD because once the economy started to pick up when we were trying to revitalize and do all these things during a downturn in the economy. So we still had to continue to invest in CD, and those monies are CD's revenues that got spent there. So, and that's what they're for and meant to do. But what you see is information services. Over the last couple years, you've seen a bigger increase, but information services, that's where we talked on Saturday about the fact that that needs to keep in line with the other businesses that we're providing, and it's not doing that. And that is just something the city has. It was very difficult during the recession. It wasn't just the council who was like trying to keep people employed and trying to keep the city going. You know, there were 300 people working here who wanted to continue to work and provide the services that they provide to citizens. And so we took hits where we could and maintained that service delivery. So there's no regrets. I mean, but there definitely was an impact on how things were. And then you go forward, and if you say to a department that got one of the worst hits, no staffing, more work, all that kind of stuff, and you say, okay, CPI is, 2 point whatever %, if you already took the bigger hit, it takes longer for that 2% to pick up to where you were before, or to compare with the other departments. There is nothing honestly wrong with this chart. We all provide good services in the city. And the reality is we have to make tough choices. But again, when you look at it, you see where all the money is going. King County, Snow County, same thing. Everybody has this dilemma right here, where public safety is where a lot of the spending is happening and continued to even during the worst periods for everybody. Now that said, with a lot of the things that other areas that council's interested in making changes to or adding to as we go forward, as these new revenues come in from the downtown and that, we need to think very carefully about where we put those. Once you see the trend, it's like, okay, where is the weakness? And it's, this chart makes it pretty clear. Again, if you look at, I see questions already. If you look at the detail, 2006 through 2022, you can see personnel supplies, and you see it by department, okay? So you can see how much it has increased. There wasn't enough room to put percentage increase between all these. We add to these every year. You could ask for these sheets every single year, and we can provide them. You can look at supplies, and they took a huge hit during the recession for all departments. Also services. Services are difficult because there's some things that you can't control, and that have to do with operations. You can't not fund your operations and still employ people if they don't have the tools to do their job. Intergovernmental services, you see where these are coming with police, fire, NORCOM, that type of thing. Again, outside the department's control. They can't control how much NORCOM sends the bill for, both police and fire. Then you see capital. We do nearly all of our capital spending from within the asset replacement fund at this point, or the capital fund if it has to do with a capital project. But we track in our asset replacement fund. We have our fleet, our facilities, all that type of stuff, but the fleet is actually owned by the Asset Replacement Fund because they're the ones paying for it. So again, that's one of the things we've done to control our budget, is to try to set money aside for what we know is coming towards us. And it has been very successful. But again, if you ask me what the biggest concern for the finance director ongoing is, making sure that that asset replacement fund, I'm more concerned about the asset replacement fund than I am about the our operating reserve. I really am. Our operating reserve is probably about 10%, but our operating reserve doesn't take into account the money we have sitting in asset replacement, which would put us up over 15%. Okay, but that is those monies set aside that say when a fire truck is needed that we have the money ready. Those take big concerns out of the budget development process. Knowing, preparing, and being able to fulfill that obligation when it's needed. The same thing needs to happen with software. We need to be starting to do those. Capital, on the capital side of things, when we build, we need to know that we have money for maintenance and operations going out, not build things you can't take care of. Install software that is going to become obsolete in 5 years and you can't afford to do the upgrades. You know, you're spending money and you're creating obligation, and we just need to be wise about the way we're doing it. And the city has done pretty well. There's some things we can do better, but put us up against any other city. And I will tell you, I haven't seen many capital facilities plans that actually look at M&O and look at staffing and that type of thing. And we do, and that's something we should be really proud of. So even if we look at this and we say, you know, we've got some big decisions to make, that's normal. That's what it's like to run a house or run a city. This is all normal stuff. You see the problems, the bigger ones, we focus on that. We'll take care of the streets and sidewalks, or at least get it into a position we're comfortable with, and then something else will be the next thing to look at. And I think Bob pretty much kind of prepared that for you in this strategy going out over a few years to meet all the needs of the city long term. So there's nothing here that is scary. What is here is a lot of information that says we've been making good decisions. We handled the recession well. We're coming out of the recession. We've invested in our downtown. Now we need to change the focus to investing in the north side of the city, that type of stuff. It's all taking what's happening today, what opportunities we have, and moving those forward. We've done it. We've done a very good job. And when you look at the revenues and you see that the top years are increasing, you know, that's the payoff. That's what we're seeing as it transitions. So again, we're not going bankrupt, and but we have decisions to make and opportunities to take advantage of, and some concerns that we're going to address. Bottom line, if you look down at the general fund, at the,
The deputy mayor had a question for you.
oh, sure.
I'm looking at capital, and I'm just curious that there's such vast differences year to year on capital expenditures. Can you maybe
Yeah.
illuminate us a little?
When we talk about capital in the general fund, it's not capital as in facilities, structure, improvements, that type of thing. It's talking about like a facility improvement that would be adding furniture that is needed, adding equipment that would be considered a capital item. We transitioned years ago from keeping capital, as in parks capital and facility capital, in the general fund. We put those over into the capital fund because a lot of them had to do with projects, capital projects. And it got confusing to have that in the general fund. So with parks capital and transportation and engineering, we put the capital projects in a capital projects fund, meaning that everything in the general fund mostly has to do with something you could pick up and walk away with. It doesn't actually become part of the building. So any asset over $5,000 is basically what goes in there. And most of them, again, are in our asset replacement fund. So it's not often we have capital in the general fund anymore. Those are the things as we go through the budget process too. There's a couple things. When you look at supplies, incremental. I mean, supplies really we don't spend a lot of money on supplies. We spend a lot of money on staff, and we spend a lot of money on services. You want to focus on the services, and you want to see what's in that asset replacement fund. What are we replacing? How's it being managed? Those are really important things to look at to get a sense of things are going in the right direction.
Councilmember Sandberg?
Thanks.
So when we have the graph of the general fund expenditure allocation history, I mean, obviously the eye gets drawn to the peak in the middle of the graph. And so.
And that would happen in any city.
In any
We
city.
just have to determine with the funding how to, a level of service. What level of service does the city want? What are you willing to pay for? And what does that take away from in another area? It was like the city manager, I was going to call him Bob, what he was talking about, efficiencies. We're effective. We're very effective. We don't get complaints about police and fire. We don't get really that many complaints about other departments within the city other than the normal stuff. But are we doing it efficiently? That's where we need to focus. We need to say, can we be just as effective and do it differently? All the different functions that we provide to our community, are they all of equal value? Or do we need to start looking elsewhere and saying, how are we going about being effective? And that's the real question for this budget. And it's we really didn't have the opportunity to really do that during the aftermath of the recession because it was traumatic. There was a lot going on. There were a lot of people struggling, a lot of departments struggling and that type of thing. And we kept cutting. And I know other cities cut a lot more than we did because they didn't have the revenue investments and the one-time revenues coming in to carry us. But now's the time. As these new revenues start coming in, how are they going to be allocated and in taking the time to look at what we're doing and maybe we're doing it exactly the way we want to do it, the way you guys think it should be done. But we need to go through the process and that exercise to get there.
So on the,
Let me, a couple of, I wanted to connect the dots now. Like I said, I was going to the last expenditure page where the blue highlight area is.
I don't have one with a blue highlighted
you?
section. Do you
Well, I
have
happen to have
copies?
extra copies. Why don't you pass that down? Who didn't get all the pages? Did you get one? Josh didn't get them? Well, at least we were an equal opportunity distributor.
Yeah,
I
the
think I
reason.
have a page, but not highlighted in blue, maybe.
Yeah, some of them might not be blue. It just has to do with which person I asked to make the copies. Okay, so we made some and then we made more.
So does everybody have the expenditure page with the blue highlights shows the program expenses by department. If you look at '06 to 2014 as a time frame, it's about $11 million over an 8-year change. That's about 38% a year. I'm sorry, 38% for 8 years, and about 4.7% a year. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I just whispered something.
We need to make a motion to extend, because I think we're scheduled till 9 o'clock.
Oh, well, take a
Make
quick
a
motion, and then we'll go.
Make a motion to extend till 10 o'clock.
Second.
Oh, we don't need that, unless you guys want it, but
We can always end early.
Tammy and I are done. so.
Let's do it. Get moved by Councilmember Freed, second by Councilmember Dewar, or Deputy Mayor Dewar, sorry. All those in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. Passes unanimously. Go
Okay,
ahead.
where I was at is during that heart of the recession, even with the pressures of the recession, the city budget grew at about 4.7%. If you look at 2015 to 2016, the budget change in the requested column. Now, remember, we're talking about this point in the budget process. We haven't done any tough love in the budget analyst stuff yet. But just looking at what the departments requested, none of which was unreasonable or irresponsible, just this is probably what I need. It's a 7.8% increase in expenditures going from 2015 to 2016. Going back to the revenue page, the revenues went up 5%. Remember I said, hey, 5%, that looks pretty good. Not against the 7.8% expense increase. And if you then look at the change from 16 to 17, it's up about 5.5% against about a 3.5% revenue increase. Okay, so now we've got to go to work and bring this thing back in shape, because otherwise, this is what happens on the back page. Tammy was just talking about the reserves in two places, the equipment reserve and the operating reserve. The cumulative effect is about 15%. That's where we want to be. That's up here. If we go with the budget as proposed, we start drawing down on that reserve, and if you stay on that path, eventually the reserve's gone. And then you got to make some tough decisions. We don't want to start going down that road again. So the proposed budget is going to have to be horizontal. And that's a $2 million delta right now. So I've got to figure out how to get this thing back in shape with about a $2 million problem to solve before I show up in September and give you what Plan A looks like, and then Plan B, and then Plan C. So that's what we wanted to share with you tonight. So unless Tammy has, I'm done.
I'll add one other thing. Every time we add staff, we compound our problem. The reason being that staff is where we spend all the money. Staff with negotiated contracts end up costing more than per year with step increases that are negotiated, CPI, W, you're going to see an increase that is in the 4%. Some years you add a class and comp, whatever. I've seen it as high as 7. It's completely outside of our control. For the most part, it's negotiated. So every time we add staff, we complicate the problem we already have. And then you take and you add staff, but if you're not adding the M&O, which is the supplies and the operating supplies for them to do their job, you're complicating it even further. And I'm saying you, I don't really mean you guys, but I mean us as a group. This is what we're doing to ourselves. We know that we need help, but if we don't have the resources for them to be out there working on the roads because we don't have the money for asphalt or whatever, then we need to be real careful about how we add an employee who is going to cost us, who has an inflation rate higher than our revenue increase rate. So anyway, that's the wisdom I pass along.
Your closing comments.
What?
Your closing comments, but we have
Yes.
Councilmember Sandberg has a question.
Well, I think that's very good wisdom. I don't know if we heeded that wisdom back in December when we did a supplemental budget increase and hired more staff. But I hear what you're saying.
I think the
that's
staff that were hired was that CD related, which had to do with the monies that were coming in? I'm trying to.
No, it was some across the board stuff.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah. But speaking to the city manager's point that we have revenues that are increasing, a few percent, but we have expenditures that are increasing even more. I mean, I'm looking at this graph and I'm wondering, there's some lessons to be learned there. I see that we have a green line that's already drawn in for 2018. So is that where we are right now in the budget process?
It's where I've been at every budget I've ever put together. When you put all the numbers together, Bob and I have not sat down, we've not looked at these, we've not had enough time to really truly analyze them. So this says, this is what was turned in. And again, there's nothing frivolous in there, but we can't do everything. And it's just like when you guys look at your goals, it's the same thing. Every department director, every person who works in a department has goals and an agenda as well. And so they get fleshed out a little bit before they come to you guys. And the way we flesh them out is based on your goals. And so that's how we'll determine what takes priority and what comes to you.
And so police and fire is a significant part of our expenses, and that's as it is with any city that has its own police and fire department. That public safety is our number one goal.
I will say that
the number one service that we provide as a city. And so our personnel would reflect that. But, it's hard for me to see here, but I would guess that the lighter blue line, that difference between the lighter blue line and the green line for every department, that difference for police and fire is significantly, that increase is significantly greater than for our other departments.
And that has to do with the reinstatement. And when I say reinstating pre-recession, I don't mean reinstating what we've been able to deliver, being more efficient, because there was a lot of what was taken away that we were able to figure out ways to do more efficiently. So we don't reinstate just to reinstate, but there's things that were taken away, the training, for instance. And I will tell you that is, when you look at this curve, the fire department did include that in this budget. So when you're seeing that curve, it is there. Okay.
So do we have any idea, like, what the percentage difference is between the oldest biennium, the 2007 and 8, and then the latest biennium, 2017 and 2018? For each department, like what the percentage increase has been over that period of time?
Yeah, what you're seeing here is a spreadsheet that I use, our department uses all the time. What we normally have is in between each year, so the percentage change. But trying to put it into a format that was easy to look at, and because sometimes we have to look at multiple sheets and it gets really confusing. So basically, with this, all we have to do is open it up and it would just go on. It's just huge. We don't usually look at it we have all of this data, but a lot of it's in our heads because a lot of us have been there for a while. And so we know certain things like the UW Bothell. I know why construction sales tax was up that year. Oh, that was UW Bothell Science Building. We know that stuff. So we don't look at it in as many years. We'll just maybe look at this. You don't want to look at before the recession and after the recession because there's a gap in there that is, it's just not your norm. You want to look at normal years.
I look at this graph and I think there's a big policy decision or several policy decisions wrapped up in this graph.
I think you're right.
Okay, thanks.
Any further questions from council? No? Well, thank you. I think this was super useful. Very helpful, I think, for us and the general public. And I used to have a stack of extra copies there. I don't know if those will be available to the public if they wanted to come in and grab a copy for themselves, but Okay.
I take all the extras. I make extras so that when I go out and talk to different people, I take them with me and people just pick up what they want. Also on this, I have, this can be a shared file. Anybody who would like this file, and so they can open it up and put the percentages in there, that's fine. I can send all this data to you, because even if you're explaining to people in the public, hey, let me show you a graph, or, let me show you the history of the expenditures, and a picture that goes with that. I can send all this to you, so you can use this as educating, tools and that type of thing. Or just use the numbers and do your own calculations. Sometimes I've seen council members do that, where they think of something I don't and prepare something using numbers we have.
Using your numbers against you. I like it. Deputy Mayor?
We didn't have a public engagement portion of the meeting, but I just wanted to remind people that Councilmember Sandberg and I will be at the library on Thursday at 7 o'clock, 7 to 9. So the public can bring their questions or tell us what they're thinking.
And so, Tammy, you were saying that somebody can get these from the clerk's office, or you'll have them when you're doing your community outreach?
If you guys want to take them for Thursday night, just, there you go. They're
Okay.
yours.
All right. Well, anything else before we break for a month?
It's your homework. So read it, mark it up, and Tammy or I, Paul, we're going to be digging into it as well and start the tough love part of this job next week.
Will do. Thank you. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Sandberg, second by Deputy Mayor Dewar. All those in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. We're adjourned.